Charles Bethel Honeycutt was born and reared in Glasgow, Kentucky. Like many young Americans of his generation, he entered the service before high school graduation. He entered the Army in February of 1945, and his father received his diploma at the Glasgow High School commencement that spring. While in the Army, Charlie served in the Philippines and on Guam, and when he was at Guam, he was in the Army Air Corps Band. Upon discharge, he married Barbara Jones and entered Transylvania College in March of 1947. He majored in music with a minor in history, and when he graduated, he became band director at Benham High School in June 1950. In 1953, Charlie returned to his alma mater as band director at Glasgow High School. He later served the school as assistant principal and director of pupil personnel. After that, Charlie Honeycutt's life is well documented here in Glasgow and Barron County. He's helped Glasgow grow in immense ways. One of these ways is the Plaza Theater, which you are all experiencing right now.
Well, when I first came to work for the city of Glasgow, we had to go before a personnel board, and he was on that board that hired me.
Well, the first time we met was, I guess, about 23 years ago, and musically we both were playing at the First Christian Church up on North Ray Street, and we had a combo of musicians together, and both he and I played trumpet, which was kind of our common denominator. That eventually led into what was known as Glasgow City Band, and also the Barron's Big Band.
I knew Mayor Honeycutt in a variety of ways. He was my high school band director for 2 years. He was also my principal for 2 years, which is totally different kind of level of activity. After I moved away, I wasn't around him very much at all, kind of lost touch. But then when I moved back, I felt like in many ways I came full circle, and it was a little bit intimidating actually at first to have your first job back in your hometown with your former high school principal, but it all worked out, and we became, I think, very close, and you know, I relied on him for a lot of information, and I learned a great deal from him.
Charlie and I go way, way back. I was raised on Washington Street, and Charlie Honeycutt, who was older than myself, lived diagonally across the street from me. So I've known Charlie Honeycutt since I was a young boy, which is basically in excess of 60 years that I've been acquainted with Charlie Honeycutt.
Even before I came back to Glasgow, I knew of Charlie Honeycutt, but when I really began to work with him was when I came back to Glasgow in 1965 and became principal of Glasgow Junior High School. And it was called the Junior High School back in those days, not the middle school. Mr. Honeycutt, of course, was at the high school serving as band director and had been for many years. And I became closely acquainted with him there and worked with him in various meetings. And then in 1969-70, I was moved to the high school as principal. And at that point in time then, I served as principal, and Mr. Honeycutt continued to be band director during that period of time until he became assistant principal. He decided that he wanted to retire from being a band director and became my assistant principal. Then a few years later, actually in about 1973-74, I was moved to the central office and became director of pupil personnel. And at that time, Mr. Honeycutt then became principal of Glasgow High School. In 1976, I became superintendent of the Glasgow City Schools, And Mr. Honeycutt then moved to the central office as Director of Pupil Personnel. And he retired in that position. So our careers have corresponded, have parallel over those different years. I worked with him in all those different capacities. He was already, he had retired and became mayor of the city. So when I retired in 1990 then, I decided to run for the city council, and then he became my boss in effect, and I worked under him on the city council.
He's still a character, was a character, you know, until the end. Charlie was always a go-getter. If Charlie wanted it, if he couldn't get in the front door, he'd figure out how to go in the back door.
Anytime that I had something to ask or I did not understand involving city government, you know, he was always there for me. And we had a daily contact, I guess every day. We ate together practically every day, and you know, I sorely miss him. And but he has been a great influence on my life.
He was a very caring person. He was a person that anybody could walk in off the street and just talk to. He always had an open door policy.
Music was our mainstay. Obviously, Charlie as a performer and also as a music director at Glasgow High School, which I wasn't a part of, but you know, his heritage was well known to me during the years that I've lived in Glasgow.
I particularly remember Charlie in that I spent a lot of time with Charlie in recent years helping to refurbish and restore Fort Williams. And it was always a situation whenever Charlie called and asked you to do something, you couldn't turn him down. You always responded in a positive manner with Charlie. He was always there to help you do the project. He didn't ask you to do something and just walk off. He would lend assistance in whatever you wanted to do. I was involved with Charlie as far as the community band is concerned. They've played at all the veterans benefits and dinners and parades and this type thing. So I also recall Charlie as the band director at Glasgow High School. I was probably in the 6th or 7th grade when he had returned from the war and went to work at Glasgow High School as the band director. So his future there is written in stone, literally all over the United States from his successes there. And so I particularly remember Charlie as easy to get along with, kind of hard-headed sometimes. He had his way that he wanted things done, and they usually were correct. We always agreed to disagree. We never got mad at each other, and we could usually always work it out one way or the other. And Charlie was a guy that you just couldn't say no to.
Charlie was a person who always had ideas about what he wanted to do, but he developed his ideas in a different way from most of us. Most people, when they have an idea about some cause they want to promote, they try to build a consensus and see if they can get help in accomplishing what they're trying to do. When Charlie had an idea born, which was quite frequently, he knew exactly where he was going with it, and his procedure was to move forward with it. And he didn't like to be told that you can't do this, or he didn't want anybody pointing out the negatives. If he thought it was a good idea, then he moved forward with it. That was a very distinct characteristic that he had. He was very impatient from that standpoint. He didn't want any delays. And I would certainly want to say this about him. In any endeavor that he got into, he always had the interest of the students when he was band director and while he served as principal and director of pupil personnel. He always placed the interest of other people first.
I think he helped the people more than anything, the people and the industry, because there are so many people that whose lives he touched that you just would be surprised about the things that he did. And he never turned a person away. And a lot of times we would ask him, because there would be so many we call them offenders, that would come in and ask for different things. And he would say, well, you know, you just never know who that person that you turn away could be.
It was people. I mean, it's basically, what do the people need? When I first met Charlie, I mean, as far as a working relationship, My brother was Bernard was head of Chamber of Commerce at that time. He was executive director. And I was on some committees there, and I went with them to council meetings. And Charlie was a council member at that time and was thinking about running for mayor. And he said, "Why don't you run for council? We need more women involved." And I got to thinking about it, and I thought, why not? You know, I wanted to get involved. And I enjoyed the chamber work, and they were behind me to run for council. And then Charlie, when he would have his meetings of those that was working for him to run for mayor, I would go with them, and a lot of his volunteers helped me get elected that first time. And we both were sworn in. He was sworn in for mayor, and I was sworn in for council in January 1986. But his drive at that time was people. He knew that we needed jobs, and that's what we went after first, and then he got into the arts. It's what keeps the people here.
In December of 2002, we were getting ready with the Glasgow City Band to perform at the Plaza Theater for our Christmas concert, and we had had a practice the Monday before, and the band didn't perform too well, and a bunch of the leaders of the band thought we needed to practice together, and so we approached Charlie on the idea, and he was kind of mad at us because we had been talking too much and wasn't paying a lot of attention at the practice, and so he wasn't in favor of the idea, but we kind of overrode him and got everybody there to practice on Saturday morning, and Charlie came in and was partaking in it with us, and again, we started talking and misbehaving a little bit as us grown adults do sometimes, and all of a sudden Charlie stood up in front of us, and he had a .32 handgun in his hand, and he said, "Now I want your attention." And so I learned about the story about Charlie packing at that time, and sure enough he was, and that was certainly an eye-awakening experience, and we all kind of chuckle about it nowadays, but he certainly had a way of getting our attention.
I was going to buy a car for the detectives, and he went with me to a car lot, and we were test driving it. And so he wanted to drive it, and we had the owner of the car lot with us. He was in the back, and we were going down Happy Valley Road, so Mayor Honeycutt wanted to check the brakes out. So he applied the brakes right in the middle of all this traffic, you know, just more or less the car just kind of hunched up, so to speak. And so we left there, and we came to a traffic light, and there was a car behind us, and I guess the light was green for us to turn right, and the mayor had not turned right yet, and I guess the driver behind us blew the horn several times, and he got out of the car, and the car is still moving, and giving this person a raking for blowing a horn at him.
Right after I was elected and we were at a meeting, I raised my hand, was recognized, and stood up and spoke. And after I did, Charlie turned around and he said, "You need to sit down and be quiet." And then in a few minutes he turned around and he said, "Oh, I'm not your teacher anymore." He said, "You're elected like I am. I guess you can speak." And that never happened again. But we didn't always agree, and we didn't always disagree, but we worked hard together. I mean, I really enjoyed, I worked 17 years with him as a council member, and then after coming here as city clerk, I still continued to work with Charlie daily. He would come in, and he was always, I was picking his mind as to, do you remember this? Can you remember what happened? And he was still very, very, very sharp. He didn't forget a lot.
Well, I have very fond memories of being in the band with Mayor Honeycutt, and back then I played trombone, and the trombone was as big as I was, and I know that he always had that bullhorn in his hand, and it seemed like anytime I couldn't keep up or was dragging behind, you know, I can remember vividly that voice coming over the bullhorn, that little Ryherd, she needs to pick it up out there, you know. And it was just, you never knew what he was going to say to you when you were on the field.
He was always a problem solver, and anything that came up that needed to be dealt with, I always knew that he would be the person that would get it done. He may take some shortcuts, but he would solve the problem no matter what. And I think one story that I remember very clearly, when in the early 70s when the band was going to New Orleans to the Mardi Gras quite frequently. They were down there on one trip, and back then most students who are in the band or have been in Glasgow very long remember the stories about the big blue buses. We had 3 international buses painted blue, which the band used. And they were old when they started using them to transport the students. But on one particular trip in New Orleans, one of the buses had a motor that blew up on it. And they were stopped at a mom and pop service station, not knowing what to do. And some farmer pulled in the station with an old truck, large truck that had a motor in it, that one of the mechanics who was on the trip, and they always carried a mechanic along to take care of problems that occurred all the time, determined that the motor on that truck would fit the bus. Mr. Honeycutt offered him $50 for the motor, the farmer, and he sold it to him, turned the truck over to him, and our mechanic, with the help of someone from the station, took the motor out, put it in the bus, and they got back on the road. So when a problem developed, he figured out some way to solve the problem.
The last year, he and I were sitting on the square on a Friday, starting the Highland Games, and both of us was in kilts, and but somebody took a picture of both of us, and men don't know how to sit with kilts on. So he taught me a lot of things, but I guess he never taught me how to wear a kilt because we didn't have our legs closed together. We had them wide open, but and I'm thinking as many times that he's wore the kilt, and I guess he forgot to. But men sometimes don't know how to sit when they wear a kilt. But again, a lot of memories, and he will always hold true to my heart.
Andy and Christy Wazell, they're formerly from the state of Maine and currently are living in Allen County outside of Scottsville. But they told me this story a year or two ago, and they've been in the band for, I guess, 2 years right now. And they had come to Glasgow because they heard that Glasgow had a community band, and both of them being musicians all of their lives wanted to continue in some way. And they asked a stranger on the square if they knew anything about Glasgow's band and how they could get involved with it. And they told Andy and Christy, they said, "You're going to have to go see the mayor." And so he pointed down to the city building and had them walk down there to see Charlie. They had never met him before, and on their way down they kind of talked to them and said, "This must be really some great band because you have to interview with the mayor to get in it." And so they were kind of looking at each other and kind of wondering what this is all about. And so they ended up down at the city building and asked to see Charlie, and that they were interested in joining the city band. And they said, "He's here right now, you just have to wait a minute." And so Charlie eventually called them back into their office and started talking to them about the band. And they didn't know who he was, and he didn't know who they were. And they told him that they played the French horn and the clarinet, and kind of gave them their background, and all the time that they were thinking, "Boy, this is really something here in Glasgow. For you have to talk to the mayor before you get a chance to play in the band." And they said at the end, the last thing he said to them was, "I'm the band director, and we practice at 7 o'clock tonight in the basement, so be there."
He changed everybody's life in Glasgow because Glasgow changed because of him, because of his drive. He didn't do it alone. He had a lot of people that helped. And how did he change me? When I was in high school and he was a band director, I would have never dreamed of running in an election. But through talking to him and I guess the confidence boost and saying, "Hey, we need you," it made a difference in my life.
Well, personally, he affected my life very much because of the close working relationships that we had. He was always a person that I could depend on, count on, to work with, and I always respected his abilities, his knowledge, and as we've already said, his motives. They were always to help someone else. And that's my fondest memories of Charlie Honeycutt, and it did impact my life.
Charlie was always someone that you could look up to. I think you could pay attention to him, and you could believe what he said. So I thought he was very participating, within the community. He was always helping somebody do something or the community improve. I think his first thing that was on his mind was Barron County and Glasgow, to see that if he could cause it to grow and to improve and to get industry in here and to get statewide recognition. So I was always impressed with the workload that he was willing to take on and the time that he was willing to spend after he retired as from the school system. So it was impressive to me that Charlie would go on, even at his age, and put out the effort that he did. That had to influence a lot of people around him.
Mayor Honeycutt had a very clear vision of what he wanted for the city of Glasgow, and I think, you know, he inspired a lot of people to look kind of outside of the box and see that we, as a smaller town, are not limited by being small. You know, he was very progressive in his thinking. He was one of the big backers of the broadband and bringing in the technology, and I think, you know, he probably inspired me and a lot of other people to just really think outside the box. And what has happened is now when I go to Renaissance meetings across the state, I have found that we are so far ahead in certain levels. We do not seem to struggle with some of the same issues that other towns of our size do, and I think it's because we have been very progressive. So that's been very inspiring to me.
Charlie's just a hard-working individual. You know, I didn't know him through his time as principal and band director and those things, but from what I saw in the last 3 years of Charlie's life, that man worked, and he worked all the time. And you know, anybody that had him working for him certainly got their money's worth from Charlie Honeycutt. And you know, in the band situation, you know, he was always there to help with the equipment, you know, help with any type of involvement that was necessary to put on a performance. And he would work days in advance getting out the advertisements and making up the posters and stuff like that. So he's very, very significant in that. But you know, everybody that I've known in Glasgow over the last 23 years that I've been here has, you know, been influenced by Charlie in one way or another. You know, and his leadership in the band, or as being a school employee, or especially being mayor the last 16 years of his mayorship there. You know, even today when I sit in George J's with Charlie or have sat with him, everybody, even after he had left the office, still calls him mayor. You know, I mean, they didn't know that he had, or they knew that he wasn't mayor, but that was still what they called Charlie, was mayor.
Oh, he totally affected all of us in Glasgow. I mean, he had such a drive, and again, as I said, such a passion at anything that he worked at. And Charlie might go somewhere and he would ask for help here, and if they said no, like I said, he was real good at going in the back door, because if he had it in his mind that that's what we needed and where we needed to be, he went after it. Just like you talk about technology, he totally believed in EPB and Billy Ray's vision. And look where we are, known around the world. He believed in the Highland Games, and he helped to push that.
Charlie became involved with Fort Williams many, many years ago, when it was still an overgrown jungle practically. Well, it was a jungle. I can remember as a kid knowing that Fort Williams was there, but it was nothing but a mound of forest and overgrown trees and shrubbery, and you could barely see the hump for where the fort itself was, and the ditch that surrounds it, and there was no wall there. Charlie enlisted me to go up there and help them clean it up. They had some different programs, and they sold bricks and gave people a deed to a foot of land, and to raise money to get this project started in the 70s. And Charlie enlisted me somewhere mid-70s, late 70s, to go up and help him kind of trim it out. And so I spent a great many Saturdays and Sundays up there mowing and cutting weeds and doing various things. And we finally talked the Kentucky National Guard into coming down with an engineering company and build that wall. We provided the materials, but they did the work as far as putting the wall up, and then one thing led to another, and we got it all slicked up and Now we've got some markers up there. We've got blacktop around it. We keep a flag flying, and a lighted flag, I might add, that's huge, 24/7. So we're also in the process of looking into trying to rebuild the ammunition building that was there during the 1861, 62, 63, before the actual attack. Charlie and I have participated in various civic groups doing a kind of a trimmed down version of a reenactment of what actually happened that day. And so Charlie and I go way back on Fort Williams, and that project is still ongoing and will continue to be for many years to come. And we expect it to be a nice tourist attraction, because we will be on the, I think they call it the highway of Civil War forts throughout the state. So it's going to be, it's going to improve as years go along, and I think it's going to be certainly a positive thing for the community.
The vision that he had for the plaza, we are working diligently to uphold that and get this thing open as soon as possible. I know a lot of people are asking about it and wondering. You know, sadly, he's not going to be here to see that, but we are hoping to maintain all the standards that he wanted and see that it reaches out to as many people in this community as a place that they can come and enjoy the arts and performances and music and theater and things of all types of art for the community. He was a big believer in that, and that's the way we are going forward with this, under the leadership of a board and the city.
As far as a person, you know, I think of him kind of like as a father in a lot of ways, a father figure. You know, I spent a lot of time with him over the 3 years with doing things with the band and playing. We had a polka band, we had a quintet, we had the dance band and the city band, and we performed at churches around Glasgow together. And you know, when you're that close to somebody, even though I was only close to him that close for about 3 years, it's hard to say goodbye to somebody, and I, along with many people in this town, will for a long time, for the rest of our lives, miss Charlie Honeycutt.
He was just an interesting person to be around, to work with, and I shall always appreciate Charlie Honeycutt.